Hi, Kasama here. We are on vacation, renting a house, and brought our doggie, Nala, with us. And I just thought I'd do a video on the pros and cons of owning a second home that could be also a vacation home rental. Stay tuned and watch. This is Kasama Lee, your community realtor. All right, here's the pro of having a second home. First of all, this may be your financial destination home that you could end up living in, right? And meanwhile, it could be a second home where you come to visit, or it's something that you might be able to rent out on a very slim part-time basis per year. This is where I would recommend that you check on the IRS rule. I'm not an expert, but I believe that if you rent it out more than 14 days per year, it's now considered a rental income property. So make sure that you work through the structure and figure all of those things out. And I believe that if you rent it out, on a very part-time basis, and it's still considered a second home, your mortgage interest is a deduction from your income. So there's just some really great tax benefits that you should look into. The other thing that you want to look at is when you decide on a second home destination, if you're considering, renting it out, maybe part-time, or maybe it'll be a rental income property, depending on how you want to structure it, you want to check on the zoning requirement, zoning guidelines. Some cities, for example, Napa, you can't just rent out your second home. You can't turn it into an Airbnb. There's some zoning requirements. You have to apply and all the things. And some cities, that is not as strict. So you'll be able to do that. So make sure you check on the local zoning requirement on what the guidelines are. That's going to be important. That's what Nala thinks too. If you find this type of content valuable, you want to hit subscribe and the bell notification so you don't miss future videos. I appreciate your support, sharing, commenting, liking, and subscribing more than you know, so we can continue to grow this channel to get the information out to more people. Thank you so much. The other thing you want to think about in terms of if you were to invest into purchasing a second home or potentially converting it to a rental income property is you want to make sure that you have about 6 months worth of reserves and the items that you want to think about, because you got to maintain the house, you got to leave the lights on, have the water on, all the things, right? Because you don't want to be turning it off and turning it back on when only when you're planning to be there on vacation. So what you want to think about is the list of items that you would need to have on the second home is the mortgage, right? Principal and interest, insurance, taxes that you're going to have to pay. So everything that you're doing on your first home, it's now going to be, there's a second set of financing that you're going to have to factor in. Also, utilities, right? The running utilities that you're going to need. Any other miscellaneous. If you purchase in an area that has HOA, then there's a HOA monthly, right? So you have to factor all of those in, and you should have about 6 months reserved for that if you're not using it as a rental income. If you're purchasing it and you're going to be using it as an Airbnb or VRBO, then of course there are associated fees with using those services, and you have to figure out, who's gonna clean the place up every time there's a turnover, right? Every time there's a guest that is there, and when they're leaving, who's turning over the property for you. So there are fees associated with that as well. I think the cool part about using it as a VRBO or Airbnb is you can book yourself, right? You have the ability to access and use the property as a vacation home when you want to, and you just block it out, right? So for example, the place that we're renting right now, it actually works as like a duplex. So the other part is a vacation home, for the owner, but they're not usually here. This is not their primary residence, so we don't really see them. But it would be easy enough for them to do the turnover, right? The turnover of the property, cleaning and changing the sheets and providing the towels. So it feels like home to us, and we love it. It's been a really great experience here. So now let's talk about the financing. Where do you get the money to use as a down payment for a second home or an investment property? So you see, in financing, again, I'm not a mortgage lender, but I've seen enough of them, and this is where you want to verify with your favorite lender, that when you are purchasing an investment property or a second home, you need a minimum of 20% down. You cannot buy, an FHA second home. You cannot do a 5% conventional down payment. You need at least 20% down. So where is that 20% coming from? There are several sources that you could look into, right? First one would be the HELOC, Home Equity Line of Credit. That's what it stands for. So in your primary home, if you have built up equity over the years because you've owned it for a long time, the definition of a home equity, the value of the equity of your home, is what the home is worth minus what you owe to the bank. Whatever that difference is the equity of your home. Well, that portion of the equity, you can get a second home equity line of credit, pull that money out, and then put it down as your down payment on your second home. You could also look at your retirement account. So if you have, for those of you who have been in a beneficial type of employment where they actually have helped build your retirement income, you can actually take a loan out of that as long as you pay it back. But that could be also your down payment. You need to, or you can refinance your primary residence. Make sure that you're really paying close attention to the interest rate, right, when you're refinancing, and do a cash out from your refinancing and use that cash out money as a down payment of your second home or investment property purchase as well. So they're just different ways, and this is where you want to be talking creatively with your favorite lender. And if you don't have one, I'm more than happy to connect you with one.